You know, we're always joking about end of the world. The reality is, if you look through your everyday life, it's the one constant. You have to feed yourself. You have to feed your family.
There are a lot of high-profile people buying your stuff. What do they know that the average person doesn't?
That's something that continues to, frankly, grow and concern me personally. These are high-worth, highly intelligent individuals who have the means, and they are spending heavy right now. They're just preparing like the rest of us. You know, there's so many different things that could go wrong that could disconnect you from that local supply. It's not far-fetched to think about having to survive for weeks or months on their own. Will the military be able to eat for a month? Sure. Will there be a military? Is somebody going to be there to keep that generator running, keep those air filters changed? I just don't see that happen. They are not prepared. Boats, tanks, or vehicles, they don't make the ammunition, they're not making the food. There's certain things you just think the military would be able to do themselves, and they're just not. The fact that they rely on guys like me is a little worrying.
Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here. Got my main man, Steve Cyros here, the apocalypse food guy. Came all the way from down south to come and visit us.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming out, my friend.
Good seeing you, Nick.
Good
Finally
seeing you.
in person.
In the flesh.
Thanks for the invite.
So you are the owner of Freeze-Dry Wholesale Foods, one of the biggest suppliers of freeze-dried foods to Department of Defense, various government agencies, and increasingly more so individuals who are stockpiling for whatever may befall mankind.
Yep.
You're also the owner of the MRE Depot
Correct.
website, where you sell MREs and make MREs.
We manufacture and sell MREs and other, disaster or survival type products, but mostly MREs.
So how did you get into this business of...
It's a long story. How much time do you have?
As much as you need. No commercials. We don't got any executive producers breathing down our necks. I am the executive producer, so
so I just have to be careful what I say to you. Is that it?
Yeah.
I don't want to get us booted or banned. No, it's actually an interesting story. It was just me personally looking for MREs for my family. We lived in California at the time, and earthquake preparedness back of mind. I just wanted to have a couple of cases. Being former military, I knew the value of the MREs, the meals themselves. But when I looked around, I saw them on eBay for $125, $150 for a case. And I knew what the government was paying. There was just no way I was going to pay that. So it was a long story short. I called around, found a supplier and said, hey, how much for a wholesale? And he says, we got to take a few pallets, get 150 cases, I think it was, and we'll get you a price of what probably was $40, $45 back then for a case. And of course, I only wanted 8 or 10 cases, but I took 50 or 60 and figured I'd sell the rest on eBay. That's going back 22, 23 years ago, where there's not much of that going on. And I think I put a couple cases on. People would take a picture of a box and say, hey, MRE, $125. Well, I took the time to open a box, take the picture of the meals, prepare some, throw them in a dish, make them look good, show the crackers, that kind of thing, the little bottle of Tabasco. And lo and behold, I was getting more than they were getting for MREs. So a couple months later, I'm out of MREs, and I call them back and say, hey, where's my next break? How much do I need to buy? And I think that was half truck, maybe 6 or 10 pallets, and I rented a U-Haul and picked them up. And 2 years later, we were bringing 18-wheelers into my garage in my neighborhood, and it was a fun little hobby that started making a few dollars for me. And then Katrina hit, Hurricane Katrina in 2005, and it just so worked out that we were the only game in town with any inventory. Had just done a large purchase agreement of a few truckloads, and military started landing helicopters down the street because we were literally feeding first responders in the morning for their evening meal because they hadn't planned more than 12 hours in advance, and it just grew from there. Now we're a tier 2 supplier, they call us, but I think on the MRE sides, we're probably very close to the top supplier because we do the meals that nobody else does. The halal or the vegetarian or more of the breakfast dishes where they tend to focus on the war fighters. We're doing a lot of the humanitarian daily rations for them, and that's grown tremendously and still is a big business for us.
It's incredible to think, we were talking about this just before we started, that you being one of the main suppliers of food, to the military is, that must be a huge responsibility.
It's almost a little scary, to be honest with you. You'd think there's certain things you just think the military would be able to do themselves or be very proficient in, and they're just not. The fact that they rely on guys like me is a little worrying. But yeah, it's something we take very serious. You in your mind, you realize you're not selling to the government as easy as to justify you're selling to that guy or gal who's going to be doing the heavy lifting if something does happen. So it makes it a little more serious for us.
Well, and just thinking about the level of preparedness, and to know, which is nothing to say against your competencies in this respect at all. But like you said, I think the average person thinks there's armies of thousands of people, in government factories making this stuff, but that's not the case. And it just goes to show how interconnected the military is with all of the critical infrastructure and with the commercial space, and how dependent they are on that.
Very much so.
If you're looking for breadcrumbs and leading indicators with respect to what might be coming down the horizon, one of the key places I would look is, what are they stockpiling? And food is one of those main things, right? So it's incredible to know that they rely on, like you say, guys like us. Like the first time the government contacted me for MREs, I was kind of dumbfounded. It's a terrifying thought
you
to
have
know.
You have to call me. You don't have enough in your stocks.
Exactly.
Yeah, it is a little scary. If you look back at food specifically, we're talking about freeze dry and retort, which is the MRE process. They didn't develop that science. They are very involved in furthering it. But if you think back on the freeze dry side to the early space program, where you think the government is the one driving that innovation, it's not. I mean, if you look at how the Department of Defense fights wars today, they don't manufacture boats, tanks, or vehicles. They don't make the ammunition. They're not making the food. They're really not as involved as you'd think they would be. They rely on, I guess, industry to innovate for them. And that is a little scary.
And you guys have been doing freeze drying since like around 9/11?
Yeah, that was freeze drying has been about 22 years, and it was probably a good 6 or 7 of that just in developing the technology.
And so for anybody who doesn't know, I mean, most people who've watched the channel now know what freeze-dried food is. But if you could just give us the quick and dirty about what the freeze-drying process is and why it's different from dehydration.
Yep, freeze-drying is the longest shelf life you can find. Basically, the short is you're taking the water or the moisture out of the food, puts it into sort of a state of suspended animation, for a lack of a better description. And it's a process called sublimation. It's, if you want to get real technical, it's basically freezing to very cold temperatures and then a bunch of thaw, warm, cold cycles. You're taking that moisture off under a vacuum rather than defrosting and having a liquid run off. It comes off as a gas because it's in a vacuum chamber, and boom, after 20 to 40 or 45 hours, you've got basically a piece of food that is unaltered, from the sense that nutritionally it's the same, looks it's very similar. It's just you've lost between 20 to 60% of the water weight, and therefore you gain an extremely long shelf life out of it, up to 25, even 30 years these days.
Yeah, you sent us some 20-year-old stuff.
That's right.
Fish, some chicken, a variety of different exotic squids. And
Did you ever try that?
Never tried the squid, no, but I'm sure there's somebody here.
They said to me, are you sending him squid? I said, oh, yeah. Want to see if he actually tries that.
Yeah, one of these days
we have time.
We'll do a more exotic. Yeah, well, you're here now,
breakfast.
So I might have no choice.
Just teasing.
But, that's the amazing thing about freeze-dried food is not a lot of people get, is that the texture is relatively intact. There's more nutrients.
Yep.
The taste is pretty good. Oftentimes, the only complication is how do I rehydrate it, which we'll probably do a bit more in-depth. You can have difficulty rehydrating. For example, fat content can
interrupt the water molecule uptake because fat and oil, water and oil don't mix. But for the most part, all you're doing, you're not altering the cell wall, the structure of the food itself. You're not changing those nutritional values compared to a heat process like dehydration, where you're using air or warm air to remove the moisture. That process of sublimation is very fast, very efficient, and with minimal change to quality, texture. A lot of people will tell you that freeze-dried foods will taste different, but the reality is if it's rehydrated correctly, you will not be able to tell the difference. People will cut corners sometimes on the rehydration and cook a piece of meat that hasn't been fully rehydrated, and therefore it tastes like it's been freeze-dried, but for the most part, you won't be able to tell.
And there's a big difference in terms of quality of these freeze-dried foods. Right now on the market, you have a lot of companies who've entered the space, and they have excellent marketing campaigns, and they have excellent people working on their packaging and their design and their presentation. But in terms of the quality of the food, that's the difference. I mean, we have a few examples here. They're just like whole cuts of meat, and and don't take this the wrong way, but the packaging isn't the greatest.
I take that as a compliment, actually.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like the actual content of the food is where you guys put and this is why you have such high profile customers who are loading up their bunkers with this stuff. And I got to tell you, man, when our assistant brought this to our attention, that you had brought freeze-dried Reese peanut butter cup cookie dough.
Raw cookie dough.
Yeah, I'm salivating just thinking about dipping into this, and this is heavy.
It is.
This is, you were talking about fats. Can you tell us a bit about your industry secrets? Maybe don't go there, but about how your proprietary process allows you to do stuff like this and whole cuts of meat compared to some of the other companies that only can do more diced,
cubed,
small portions,
small meals. Yeah, that's what sets us apart. We focused, because we spent that 6 or 7 years with the military on developing the technology. We're still 2 generations ahead of anybody else in the freeze-dry world, that we have the ability to do those whole cuts of steak, those whole chicken breasts, whole pork chops. It's not even really new technology. We were doing pork chops 20 years ago. It's just we're so far ahead on the freeze dry side that we've never, still to this day, we've never focused on marketing. We're not a retail company. For us, it's doing innovative things with the freeze dry. We're doing things with blood plasma and combat medic type stuff, emergency field medicine that is 3 or 4 generations ahead. But back to the sort of the food world, that's what lets us do things. Nobody is able to do the cookie dough as an example because it is a high fat content. Fat will cause problems with current technology freeze dried, and that's why you see people like the retail sellers of freeze dry machines won't do that. They won't do whole steaks, and I can't really go into the way we do it because that's sort of our edge, our advantage. But you get basically the same shelf life on a piece of steak. How can I say this? It's the packaging more than the actual process, and that's where we've made some tremendous advantages. Not in the look of the packaging, but the technology that goes into it. Things like nitrogen flushing, inert atmospheres, and I don't think anybody's figured that out yet, and it'll probably be a couple decades before they do. So we continue to have fun doing things like cookie dough and king crab and whole fillets of Chilean sea bass that nobody else is able to do. That's kind of what sets us apart.
It's really incredible technology when you think about that. You could take anything,
isn't it,
and make it last 25 or 30 years, and it's going to taste the same
without changing the actual food. You'll often see in dehydrated that it just doesn't look palatable, but a steak, a freeze dried steak, looks as good as a fresh steak you get at the grocery store, and that to me is amazing. That's the fun of it.
Well, most people just want normal food. Like, they don't want all the additives. They don't want all the preservatives.
Yep.
I shouldn't say that because a lot of people get an addiction to MSG and things like that. But I would say that, if I had to load up my bunker with something, I would want the variety. How many varieties of food do you guys offer? I know it fluctuates because, of course, depends on what the farmer brings you, right? But
yeah, to a degree. That's what sort of drives. For me, it was about, if you think, how we shop for food during normal times. You go to the grocery store, you might pick up a few steaks, a couple of chicken breasts, some fresh broccoli, a couple of other veggies and some side dishes, some rice, some grains, and a few desserts. And that's your weekly grocery shopping. Yet for some reason, the freeze-dried world, the MRE world, everybody's gone towards these prepackaged, high sodium, high preservative goulashes that I just frankly never understood. That's not how we eat during normal times. So for me, I wanted to, it was as much the military driving this, when they are looking to, provide a meal for a guy working third shift on a submarine at sea for 4 months without seeing the sky. They want to feed him healthy. They want to make that meal look like the meal that their wife would make him when they were home, or their mom. And to me, that's how it should be in a disaster. I'm not thinking about reaching for that chili mac or that beef stew if the power goes out. I kind of want a steak dinner, or I want a hamburger. And that's what we do a little bit differently. You make your meals. You buy like you would buy at a grocery store during normal times, but when disaster does strike, eat the same way you would if it wasn't a disaster.
Yeah, I think some people, I eat some of the entrees that we sell quite regularly just out of convenience.
I do too. Yeah.
But if I was to be thinking long term about grid down, I would want something that I could mix and match and make my own stuff with. And it's unfortunate that companies like yours, who are masters of the art in terms of the types of stuff that you're freeze drying, don't have more of an edge in the marketing aspect, because unfortunately, I think those companies are kind of taking advantage of people's lack of knowledge and just banking on the fact that they're going to buy a bunch of this stuff, invest thousands of dollars in these buckets,
throw them in a closet,
and when the time comes for them to use them, they're going to quickly realize the mistake that they made, and they're going to find that they have a closet full of dog food. It'll keep your dog alive. I mean, I guess the dog's got to eat too. You could fatten up your dog and eat the dog.
You could.
But in terms of actual palatability, I've tasted a lot of freeze-dried foods, and I know that there's a spectrum. There's your stuff on the far end over here. There's kind of the in-between stuff. I'm not going to name any brands. And then there's the really low-quality stuff that if you actually read the ingredients, it's all preservatives. There's no meat.
Yep.
There's meat flavor.
TVP.
There's, it's all like variations of corn syrup and cornstarch and all other types.
This and that.
Yeah.
I'm happy to let them have that space. Frankly, it's a conscious choice we make. I never wanted to be a marketing company. We could very easily bring in, spend a few dollars, bring in some marketing people and create packaging that, looked, like something you'd buy in a retail store, but I just don't feel comfortable going down that. Personally, I don't want to be the car salesman of the industry. I'd rather focus on the technology. I'd rather be driving innovation, and we never really set out to sell to the consumer or the commercial world. My plan was always, as a former military guy, to benefit the military. And if we can cross over into the consumer world and help some people put some food away that looks more like a regular grocery shopping week for them, then great. But I just never felt comfortable, I guess, becoming a marketing company more than a food company. For me, it's the technology, it's the food, it's the relationship with the ranchers, the direct growers out there that are moving soil and moving cattle. That's what I really like about the business. So it's a conscious choice. Yeah. They're in their way. They are helping people get prepared, because let's face it. I mean, everybody will tell you in a disaster, any calories will save your life, and that's probably true. Anybody that's ever had to switch from a normal 9-to-5 diet to an MRE diet or a high sodium, highly processed diet, they're going to have some issues, digestive and otherwise, morale and whatnot, but it'll keep them alive. So I'm happy to let them take that space.
People do overestimate their capabilities, though, I will say, in terms of what they're going to be able to tolerate.
That's
I think people say now, "Oh yeah, I'll eat anything,"
Yep.
But
do that for a few days.
Yeah, have you ever been in that situation?
Low
before?
fiber, high fat, high processed. Yeah, that'll get you pretty quick.
Yeah. So I mean, I think a testament to your business model is the fact that there are a lot of high profile people buying your stuff, and I know you can't talk specifically about any of those individuals. But what can you tell us about some of the orders that these people are placing, which I think should be mildly concerning to some people who are looking at the state of the world to know that the elites are stockpiling this stuff.
What do they
for
know
some
that,
reason?
that
What do
we
they
don't know?
I mean, well, I know, but what do they know that the average person doesn't know? But can you tell us a bit about the nature of that aspect of the business? Because that's always been intriguing to me to know. I mean, we already touched on how the government is relying on guys like yourself to meet their needs, but to know that the celebrities, for lack of better terminology, are also going down this path is intriguing to me.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. That honestly is some of the feedback that we've gotten that's helped us drive where we focus our time and effort. These are high worth, highly intelligent individuals who have the means to prepare, and they frankly will. How do I say this carefully? They will spend more than they need to make sure that their family, that their workers, that their inner circle is prepared should something happen, and they are spending heavy right now. But at the end of the day, they're saying the same thing. I don't want to live for 3 years on a highly processed beef stew for breakfast, lunch, and dinner 3 days a week. Give me a meal like I'm eating now when I'm on my plane. These guys understand nutrition, and they are names that that you see in the news on a daily basis. But at the end of the day, they're the same as you and I. They just want to make sure they're comfortable if something does happen. And I'm sort of honored to be a part of that. I listen to that wisdom, those requests, and that drives our product line. If that makes sense.
They use a lot of discretionary tactics to place orders.
You've dealt with some of them, have you?
Well, I think we were talking a little bit earlier too about how, in order to not draw attention to certain things, can you, and maybe you'll be giving some people advice here who want to buy stuff from you, but are a little concerned about the OPSEC aspect of it. What sort of techniques are these high net worth individuals utilizing in order to place these apocalypse scale orders from you without drawing any attention to it?
That's actually a great question. So we have a couple that to this day we haven't spoken with directly. They choose to remain anonymous, yet they're placing orders that the average person just can't place. They will.
Are they still a couple? I'm just trying to figure out who this might be.
Yeah,
that's okay. You don't have to say.
I got to be very careful.
I have my suspicions.
You'll get Let me. You'll get large weekly orders, and based on where it's going, you'll know who it is. But they'll choose to remain anonymous. And then
use a proxy or something.
Yeah, and then there's others that will pick up the phone and say, "Hi, this is XYZ, and can I chat with the boss?" And they'll be honest with you. Here's what I'm hoping to do. Is that something we can work together on? I don't want my name out there. Please never publish a customer list. I don't want to be marketed to advertising. I'm going to use an email address and a shipping address that can't be in the general public. And are you okay with that? And they'll go so far as fire off contracts through lawyers, NDAs, and whatnot. But for the most part, they're no different than you and I. They've got a budget. They're buying, whether it's a few cases of this and that every week to pallet size or truck size orders. They're just preparing like the rest of us. For the most part, 80% of it, it's not complicated. They make a purchase, pay for it with a credit card, and ask us to keep keep some privacy for them, and it gets shipped just like everybody else.
Is it crazy to know that you're keeping the elites alive if shit hits the fan?
I'll tell you what's crazy. No, you know what's crazy though? Most of them do buy and throw in a bunker, and you don't get that feedback. There's a few of them out there who are in the news every day, for good or bad, that actually use our freeze-dried foods specifically on their planes and in their multiple office locations because they don't have access to refrigeration. These are high energy, highly intelligent people balancing multiple companies and working on some large contracts companies, and they're eating chicken nuggets every day because they just like the idea of being able to tear
Everyone's
open the couch.
Kids like chicken nuggets, no matter who they are. Billionaires.
I'd love to tell you that our number one product is a gourmet steak or a lobster. It's chicken nuggets is probably top three.
Wow.
Hamburgers, chicken nuggets, and scrambled eggs. That's our top three products.
How do you
right
rehydrate a chicken nugget properly?
Not easily. Honestly, I think probably 85% of those get eaten right out of the bag. They're actually really good. Just tear open and eat. They're fully cooked. But you can rehydrate them in a fridge overnight, wrapped in a damp paper towel, or you can throw them on a steamer and in 20 minutes have a hot, ready meal. There's a lot of ways.
So you said there's a few people who don't mind if you drop their names.
Oh shoot, I did say that, didn't I?
Is there anyone who's like out there? Is there Andrew Tate? Has he contacted you yet? If not, he will after this podcast, I'm sure, because he knows our buddy Ron from Atlas Survival Shelters.
Yep, my good friend Ron. If you saw their last video where they gave a tour of their shelter, you may see a lot of those blue bags in plastic bins. Let's just say that. Go watch that video and you'll see.
So they're eating well.
They will eat well. Yeah. They're, I'm not sure if they're eating on a daily basis. They're not the one I was talking about.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, we'll just leave it at that. We'll leave you guys guess in the comment section below.
See me squirming.
Write some names down there. Either way, I'm sure they have good security teams, so we won't get within a few. Yeah, we do have
some names. I mean, we have. It doesn't have to. We're not talking about always the Tim Cooks or the Elon Musk. There's a lot of just everyday CEOs, high energy individuals running a whatever business. They just want to take care of their family. They're not necessarily buying truckloads, but they're names that companies you would recognize that are buying just like you and I.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know there was one individual we were talking about beforehand who is a very notable figure up there.
Yep.
And
please don't mention that.
I will not mention that name. I'm sure people can speculate and figure it out. But so, I mean, this is just incredible to me to know that it really shows you how small the world is when you get into this industry.
Yep.
And you realize that even the degree of separation between, myself and those people now, having you as that conduit through them. And it's incredible to know that, like you said, we are all the same and we all have the same needs, regardless of what end of the socioeconomic spectrum you come from.
Yep.
So is there, you get a lot of people, obviously not just high net worth individuals, but just average Joes who are buying your stuff too. How cost effective is it to get into freeze dried?
To actually start freeze drying?
No, just to buy.
Yeah. If you, I'll tell you a big segment of our customers I would have never thought what, just because I've got some experience, former law enforcement, is sort of the first responder marketplace. And if you look at cost specifically, and I bring them up because I hear it a lot from them, a fast food meal today, I don't know what it is up here, but a Big Mac and a fry and
I spent $30 on I go to this place called name drop Chop Leaf, and for a little bowl of salad it was $30.
$30 for a bowl of salad.
I get double meat.
Okay.
But $30 for that and a drink.
So do that 5 days a week when you're on the job. And not only, that sounds healthy at least. The Big Mac guys and the fish sandwich guys, and the French fries, they're getting 1,200, 1,500 calories in one meal, which is it's just not sustainable. The amount of sodium, the amount of fat. So if you look at buying a half dozen different things you can throw in the trunk of your cruiser, in a compartment in your ambulance, or to have a meal on the side of the road if you just got called out for overtime. It actually is costing less to eat well than it will eating out, for sure. So if you compare it to fast food, it's already cooked.
In some of it is.
Not all you need is water. And in most cases, you don't need water even in a pinch.
And just to clarify, some of it is, like, you can get uncooked varieties.
That's
but
true.
Most of it's cooked.
You do need to watch, and it'll always tell you cooked or uncooked. Uncooked is not as daunting a task to cook as you would think. There are a lot of uncooked meats that you can rehydrate, like you would do a beef stew using boiling water. That'll cook a steak for you in minutes. It's not like you need to build a fire and grill and saute with some exotic spices. But yeah, you do need to be conscious of the cooked or uncooked if you're eating right out of the bag.
And the other premium, like, I'm just thinking of that freeze-dried roast beef. The other premium here is that if I wanted to take that in, if I wanted to take a slab of roast beef out into the bush for a week, go on a camping trip, I need a cooler, I need a way to preserve that. That you just throw that in your bag. And so the part of the premium you pay is the energy that went into freeze drying it, so you don't have to refrigerate it.
Yeah, you are paying a little bit of a premium for that, but really, again, when you compare, that particular roast beef is a USDA prime, very high-end steamship round roast, hand cooked, hand cut, hand trimmed, and because it's fully cooked, you could actually grab a few pieces, throw it in a Ziploc bag, and chuck it in your backpack and eat on the go. When you do need a protein boost or whatnot. But yeah, the preparation, the lugging of a cooler and ice, you're eliminating all of that. And is there a premium on it? Maybe 20%, 25% over buying at the grocery store, but it's not as expensive. It's not a $20 slice of roast beef, if that's what a lot of people are thinking. That whole bag is probably $35, maybe $38. And 5-6 meals, it's not much more than that Big Mac and French fries that you'd buy at a takeout place. So there's not as much of a premium as you would think. Premium.
It's a good point.
Yeah,
and people get 15% off too if they go to your website and use coupon code Canadian Preppers. So go and check it out, guys. This is great stuff. Excellent stuff. So the government, we were talking before about how there's different sort of classes, and depending on what your rank is, maybe you're eating a little bit better. What is the government buying, and what do they purchase? Like, is there a difference, I guess, between what the military is buying and what governments like the embassies are buying? And can you talk a little bit about just the state of the industry as it is?
Definitely. I can talk a little bit more about the government than the private sector. But yeah, there's multiple classes. Within the Department of Defense specifically, you have both the military component and the civilian component, civilian being typically continuity of government. But even if within each of those channels, you have multiple, what's the right word? I don't know how to say this, but the
tiers,
maybe tiers. Yeah. The privates and the corporals on the ground are just not eating, frankly, the same as the colonels or the generals. And then there's the contractor world inside of the military. And then when you get into the civilian side, a senator or a congressman or woman is not going to eat as well as that typical government employee, that bureaucrat that's keeping the lights on or the trains running. So there's multiple classes. Yeah, they we sell hamburgers to the grunts, to the guys doing the real work, and then the steaks will go to the folks that sit at the offices, if that makes sense. But you'll have multiple classes within either defense or the civilian
not much
side.
is going to change, it sounds like.
That's always going to be the same. Yeah.
How well prepared do you think the government is, like, in terms of their, like, are they really in a position to deal with themselves in an emergency, or can they even do that? Or are they ready to, do they have like a stockpile of this stuff for the public when the lights go out?
Yeah. Okay. That's some interesting information. I'll tell you this, it's not as comprehensive of planning as they'd like to think. Being in the industry.
So the answer is no.
They are not prepared. Will the military be able to eat for a month or 3? Sure. Mm-hmm. Will there be a military to be able to eat for 3 months? I'm not so sure there will be. They've thought of a lot of the stuff, but you can't think of everything in that kind of post disaster environment. So I don't know. I have my doubts. Continuity of government wise, do they have bunkers? Do they have food and medical and dentists lined up? Absolutely. And vision and everything else you think you might need, or a family of that congressperson might need. But, is somebody going to be there to keep that generator running, keep those air filters changed? I just don't see that happening. I don't think they've thought it through that much. Depends on how bad the scenario is, but I don't see them, they'll have plenty of food, but I don't see that lasting for too long.
I don't think their level of continuity of government planning is as sophisticated and long-winded as some of the Eastern countries who've kind of wargamed this from every direction. I mean, we had a guest in here recently who was talking about how Kim Jong-un had a plan to how he's going to dig himself out of the bunker. They thought it through to the point of if the entranceways get blown out,
bombed,
he knows how to run the cat or whatever, the front loader or whatever that's going to excavate and get him out of there. So, they've thought this all the way through to the end.
You don't have that in this country.
I don't think so. And so you were also saying last time that you noticed that there was a lot of government employees who are buying as private individuals.
That's something that continues to, frankly, grow and concern me personally. The government purchases we deal with are very paperwork intensive, POs, payment processes, terms, specifications, all argued and determined well in advance. The private purchases with a government email address going to a residential home in Virginia or the suburbs, that continues to grow. And that always worries me personally because, again, it's like, what do they know that we don't? But yeah, that's a little concerning. That's a segment that continues to grow. I guess if I worked for FEMA, I would be of the mindset that I need to take care of my family as well. So it may not be that uncommon, but the sheer volume of that continues to grow.
Well, they must realize what the limitations of their ability to provide for the population are. So therefore, they take it upon themselves to prepare for themselves.
You find a lot of blind faith in certain government positions that everybody assumes that everything will be okay. But the fact that they're buying with their own personal funds tells you that they don't necessarily believe that. Why else would you stock food at your house knowing that your department has a bunker and food? Maybe they don't have as much faith as you would think.
You would think so.
Yeah.
And is the government purchases, are they more or less the same? You said that they kind of started ramping up a few years ago. What is the state of supply and demand right now?
Since the last time we chatted, which I believe was 7 or 8 months ago, the one trend that has changed is they are getting more into being able to actually freeze dry foods themselves. They still buy a lot of quantity of freeze dried foods, but now I believe they're planning beyond anything from 1 to 3 years that they've stocked up, from water to food to diesel to run the generators. So now they're thinking beyond what happens after 3 years when the stockpiled food runs out. So we're doing things like building them some capabilities at the consulate level or the State Department level in foreign countries where they could be disconnected from society, be able to farm some fruits and veggies, freeze dry them themselves. So that's been the one change I've seen recently. And that tells you they're thinking a little bit longer than a year or 3 years, which is interesting to me.
Wow. So they're actually trying to get your knowledge and insight on how to do this.
Yeah, what specifically, I think I can talk about specifically what we're doing is they've asked for fully kitted containers, military transportable containerized units, four 40-foot containers in a pod that can go deploy to by helicopter, by truck, anywhere in the world, and be self-sufficient, be able to do power generation and fuel storage in one of those containers, refrigeration, both freezer and refrigerated in a second, and then 2 units of actually freeze dry capable machinery, so they can take locally grown produce, freeze, and then freeze dry, and then package themselves. And that's it was actually a very smart idea. I wish I'd thought of it myself. But
so they want to be able to essentially, because we collaborated with a guy called the Container Guy who
yes,
is innovating some portable solar farm factories in containers, and I guess pairing that power generation with a portable freeze dryer, you drop it in the middle of some community where there might be a agricultural base, and they convert that into an MRE is essentially what you're saying.
exactly that. Yep. Typically, they are connected. The consulates, embassies, they're all connected to the states because they're mostly staffed by U.S. citizens. Not all, not exclusive, but they want to eat the same food that they're used to eating in their home in the States. Therefore, all the food comes out of the U.S. All their supplies come out of the U.S. and they're preparing for the eventuality of being disconnected from that. Meaning, if for some reason that supply from the mothership dries up, they want to be able to go into the local community and either buy local produce or grow their own, raise some chickens or whatnot, and actually be able to freeze dry their own meals. So in other words, when the DC machine, the DoD supply dries up, they don't want to be cut off. They want to be able to sustain themselves. It's an interesting idea.
Well, it's quite concerning that embassies would be preparing to be cut off from the mothership. I mean, there would have to be a disaster of pretty
huge magnitude,
massive proportions in order for that supply chain to be completely severed, you would think.
Yes and no. I mean, I don't believe they're planning for an SHTF scenario. I think if you look at civil unrest, it could be just a period of weeks or months where they're disconnected because of some unrest in a local country, maybe a country in the Middle East where they just might not be able to get trucks in. It's just not cost effective to helicopter in their food on a daily or weekly basis. They just want to be prepared for that. So I don't think it's planning for the end of the world as we know it for them. I think they're just trying to plan for some unrest, some disruption in supply.
I think it was 8 months ago when we had our conversation.
Yeah.
And around that time, I think we were talking about how orders to these embassies were ramping up. And then, lo and behold, we have this Middle East crisis unfold.
That's
where
true.
There is major shipping disruptions as a result of what's happening in the Red Sea and the Bab el-Mandeb Strait with the Houthis.
Yeah.
So, it seems quite prescient on their part to have foreseen some calamity. And I'm not saying that they had insider knowledge or anything like that, but it's I guess just they knew that it's a powder keg that could potentially lead to some disruptions at some point. And it's something I don't think a lot of people have thought about, is just how embassies will factor into a global crisis. Because what do you do if you find yourself in the thick of a war, and here you are on what is
sovereign ground,
but
surrounded
in a foreign
by a hostile nation or hostile population.
That'd be a good basis for a movie, I think, like a zombie apocalypse on a sovereign.
Pretty sure it's
embassy.
been done. But
Maybe.
if you think about it, they didn't necessarily forecast unrest in the Middle East. There's been unrest in the Middle East since I was born.
It's true.
But there's so many different things that could go wrong that could disconnect you from that local supply. So it's not far-fetched to think about having to survive for weeks or months on their own. They can always call in rapid reactionary force from the Marines, but sometimes they don't want to do that. Just close the gate and be self-sufficient. It's not an end of the world scenario every time, I don't think. But who knows? I could be wrong.
It's only a matter of time before a lot of these crises come to a head. Let's hope that some peaceful resolution can come to pass, but it seems increasingly less likely. But you never know. I mean,
you have an unlimited budget. I guess you can plan for any eventuality. They're very good at spending our tax money, so you got to.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people might take issue with that. I'm sure.
I don't write the checks.
Yeah, you just
Don't yell at me.
Yeah,
Yep.
somebody's got to do it, right?
Yeah, here's the thing. I mean, I take a little bit of pride in it. If they're going to do it, I'd rather have them at least, because these are our neighbors that are staffing these places. At least make sure they're eating healthy. I don't want my cousins or kids or neighbors to eat beef stew for breakfast, lunch, or dinner either, or TVP. So at least make sure they're going to eat. I take pride in that.
Yeah, and I would encourage people to check out both of your websites, both the Freeze Dry Wholesale and the MRE Depot. I haven't tried a lot of the MRE stuff. I know we're going to do that today and tomorrow, hopefully. Yep. And you'll give us some insider advice on how to rehydrate stuff. That's what I'm looking forward to, because there's an art form. I know you say a lot of this stuff, you can eat it right out of the bag, and it's surprisingly pretty good. And you wouldn't think so. Like, certain things would taste good dry, but there's a few of these things that, surprise me.
Some will taste better actually out of the bag.
Yeah,
I'll get you to try some if you.
As long as you got an ample supply of water and you're not.
You will need to drink, definitely. Yeah. Hydrate. Yeah, the MREs are a whole different story. We can spend some time on those too, but same concept. I want to make sure they're eating healthy. That's kind of what drives us. We do that more so in the freeze dried because there's an emphasis. MREs are very similar to canned in that you shove everything in the can and cook it at very high temperature to make sure there's no bacteria or microorganisms that you don't want. Freeze drying is a little bit different. We can be very clean. We can use if you look at roast beef, there's nothing but beef in that bag. We don't even season it because some people can't take too much excess sodium, but I get to have a little bit more fun with the freeze dry line. Of course, we do have the unhealthy cookie doughs and brownies and full slices of cheesecake.
Morale boosters.
Chicken nuggets. Yeah, morale boosters. Exactly. Yeah. But when you want just a pure, clean chicken breast that's all natural, free-ranging, vegan feed, no antibiotics, that's where we have some fun and we can do.
In those dire situations where people are struggling and people are stressed out.
Yes.
People shouldn't underestimate the importance of a good meal to motivate people to want to survive in the first place. I mean, there's something about that. It's
true.
We often overestimate our abilities in terms of how we're going to deal with a situation. And, we think that we're going to be really tough and we're not going to need any of these amenities. But, it's going to go a long way in terms of just giving people that little bit of pep that perhaps might make things work a little bit better, especially more harmoniously in a group setting.
Yep.
If you're dealing with a bunch of stressed out people who have to live together in close quarters, having some comfort foods can go a long way in terms of creating peace amongst the population, as opposed to, getting people.
Very much so. The military has spent a tremendous amount of money working the problem of menu fatigue, and as a result, found ways to improve morale. It's a real issue. They see it in the military with the war-fighters. You toss a guy into a hostile environment, and let's face it, we never fight wars in Beverly Hills or Palm Springs. It's it's always in the sandbox at 120 degrees. It's never a comfortable environment, or it's in an Arctic climate where the only thing that they have to look forward to is a meal. And everybody says, in an emergency, I can eat the same thing every day for months, no problem. It's the difference between survival or not. And you probably will, given the choice, but you'd be very surprised at how quickly you would get tired of eating the same thing. I mean, you're talking a couple of days, not weeks or months. You're not going to make it months. So people ask us, why do you freeze dry lobster and Alaskan king crab? And they're expensive foods, but my family has a tradition. Canadian Thanksgiving, we would have Maine lobster every year. We don't do a turkey. And a lobster meal in a disaster when you're in a high stress environment already, because you don't know if the power is coming back on. You cannot understate the benefits to morale. Just being able to have something familiar, and maybe it's mac and cheese or it's chicken nuggets for your family, but there's a direct correlation between how productive you can be as a member of a fighting squad or a family or a farm co-op based on what you're eating. It's a direct correlation. So to me, that's where, you can't put a value on that. Would I pay 5 times for that piece of lobster a month into a disaster? Absolutely. But you don't need to. Buy it at today's value, put it away, and if you ever do need that boost, it's there.
Freeze-dried food is kind of like the precious metal of prepping supplies, because the value of a lot of these things is only going to continue to go up. Food is not calculated in the CPI, and we all know how much the price of food is going up.
Yep.
And there was an interesting article on Zero Hedge the other day. It's something I've been talking about for years and encouraging people that food is money, but food tends to depreciate over time because it's not, it's perishable.
Degrades. Yep.
But typically, if you can get food, though, that isn't perishable or isn't perishable for a long period of time, I can only imagine what a Black Angus roast beef is going to cost in 25 years.
Yep.
I imagine
people don't realize that.
Supply and demand, energy, whatever sort of, bird flu that infects the cows, cow flu, who knows what it's going to be, so it's really an investment almost, not an investment in terms of you're going to get this wicked ROI, but in terms of preserving wealth almost. I mean, food is the original currency.
It is. Yep. Look at the trade routes. We valued things like spices more than gold and fabric. Salt. Absolutely. Yeah. I think people don't often realize that, but with the war on, cows and lab grown meat on the horizon and, bug protein being discussed, you may not be able to get USDA prime roast beef 20 years from now. You just may not be able to buy it. You may not be able to get a real chicken breast that's unadulterated. So yeah, there's real value. It might be a better investment than some of your shares of XYZ Corporation.
I agree. Yeah, it's one of those things you really can't lose on. Like, it's not even insurance, because you're guaranteed, like most prepping you can justify as being insurance. I may never use it, but if I need it, it's there.
It's there.
Whereas this in particular, this type of food, which is as close as you're going to get to normal food that you would buy in the grocery store, you're always going to use it, no matter what.
Very good point.
So
you can invest in art, for example, and during normal times, you can sell a Van Gogh for 3 times what you paid in 20 years, but in unnormal times, in time of upheaval or great disaster or financial adversity, you're not going to be able to get your money out of art, classic vehicles. Think of all the things that people are investing in, but I guarantee you that a steak will not go down in value. I mean, I can almost, it's not investment advice, but I can almost guarantee that for real. Mm-hmm. If you look at historically the price of foods, you'll see a dozen eggs drop here and there in price, but look at it year over year, it's almost never gone down. That you're almost guaranteed to get your money back out of it in 10 years, never mind 20 or 30.
Well, we're in this situation with agriculture where, we had that green revolution happen in the, mid 20th century, I guess, where we just started producing a crop load of food.
Yep.
But then what
industrial
that does,
farming.
Yeah, it leads to a greater population who, require that food.
Yep.
So it's, I think they call it Jevons paradox, where the more energy, the more resources you create, you just create more people to consume them. And so that's why the price of food never goes down.
Yep.
Right. And now you have energy scarcity, deglobalization, viruses. You have the government breathing down our neck at every turn. All of these factors combined means that the price of food is only going to go up.
Yep.
And even if it weren't to go up, it's already so high that, I cannot see, barring some like technological revolution, maybe lab grown meat,
3D printing our food,
something like that. It's going to be a long time, I think, before we enter into that age of abundance where we see deflation in food. I can't envision it at this point in time.
That's true. And I think people focus on, we're always joking about end of the world. or SHTF. The reality is, if you look through your everyday life and look at the stuff you consume on a daily basis, it's the one constant. You have to feed yourself. You have to feed your family. So it doesn't have to be just for a disaster. Let's say a job loss in the family, an economic downturn, more inflation. You might be better off eating some of that freeze-dried food because it frankly costs less than going to the grocery store. So it's not just for disasters. It's something your body needs every day.
Now, in terms of shipping to Canada, you obviously ship anywhere in the United States, no problem.
Yep.
Do you ship to Canada?
That's a good question. We do. And what we do, because we ship to the U.S. Free, we give a credit, about 50% of the actual shipping cost to Canada. So we do have to charge for it. But because we will ship anywhere in the States for free, we give them a credit. And that winds up being about $30 per order. Shipping is pretty expensive. So instead of charging actual cost, which might be $52 to send a large order by post to Canada, we'll basically charge them the half of that, or $28 or whatever that works out to be. And then sometimes there can be GST charged or taxes charged by customs. Sometimes there can be brokerage fees, but for the most part, what you pay is all you pay. It's a delivered price. You just have to be aware that sometimes certain orders can get interrupted or returned to us, and if that does happen, we always stand behind it with a full refund. So you're never out of pocket. But it has happened a few times lately. It's getting a little tougher to ship internationally than it has
Those
been.
government workers on the border got to make sure they keep their jobs.
You can have one order going to Sally down the street in Mary, and the orders are the same, and one will get charged $6.07 for GST, and the other one doesn't. So it's a bit bizarre. And then the third order might get returned to us, but you're covered. We always ship insured. We don't mark that up in any way, and if there is ever an issue, we stand behind it. But we do ship anywhere in the world.
Nice.
Just always can't guarantee that you'll get meat into Australia, as an example, or seafood items in Southeast Asia.
Who's working that day.
It does. Sadly, depends.
At the customs. Now, in terms of freeze-dried versus MREs, what would you say the spread is? Myself personally, as much as I like freeze-dried foods, and as much as for me, MREs are a little bit more because they have to be.
Quality-wise, you mean?
Yeah, I still understand the value in having some, because there's something about having everything you need. You have variety, you have versatility. Yep. You have a shitload of packaging, I should say.
That is true. The amount of waste in one MRE. It's a first strike ration is roughly 3 MREs, but that's a lot of waste.
So this is 3 MREs. So this is a full day's worth of food. I'm assuming 3,500 calories, 4,000 calories.
About 4,000 calories, yes.
So that's for like when you're rucking it.
The first 72 hours, those are actually designed for the first 3 days of combat. First strike, is what they called it, because that's what they're doing with it. So the first 3 days, they don't have room to carry a lot of food around, multiple MREs, so they give them 3 of these, and they're covered for 72 hours.
And it's kind of cool because you can eat certain parts of it.
Yes.
And you don't have to prepare the whole thing. You can munch on some of the crackers we're going to break a few of these down and see exactly. There's just tons of stuff in
protein
here.
Bars, pizza bites, sandwiches.
So much variety. Now, there's a lot of high fructose corn syrup probably too.
There is.
It's not like your pure
all natural.
Foods,
yep.
But it kind of has to be, right? Because that's the only way you can kind of make something like that.
Yeah, they're fortified.
Otherwise it costs 10 times the amount.
Yeah, it's almost, I think, not as much for shelf life as it is just for they're trying to shovel as many nutrients and calories into these guys as they can. That's why it's extra calories. It's might mean the difference between being able to effectively fight in a combat situation or not if you don't have enough calories. So I don't think it's, the reason they throw the high fructose corn syrup in and the fillers, it's more for nutritional value than shelf life.
Right. Get the calories into
they fortify them. They want to shove a ton of electrolytes and vitamins, minerals in, because they're not getting that if they're snacking, if they're eating Snickers bars or whatnot. These are considered, the first strike rations are considered hand foods They don't need to stop, light a stove, heat water. These are tear open and eat on the go, mostly in one hand while your other hand is occupied pulling a trigger. That's really what they're designed for.
And they'll be maybe the one main entree that requires the heater.
Yeah, they don't. And these, they don't have that main entree. They do throw a heater in, but that entree will be like it'll be like a commercial Hot Pocket type meal, a roast beef and cheddar wrapped in dough. It'll look like a Hot Pocket. It's designed so they don't actually have to cook it. Now, an MRE, a traditional MRE, will have that beef stew or that chili mac or that vegetable omelet. Those are designed to be heated.
So that's the difference between the First Strike and the MRE, is that this is for on the go, rucking it into whatever your destination is.
Exactly.
When you get there, that's when you eat the MREs.
Yep. That's when you can set up camp.
Awesome.
So the difference between freeze-dried and we call them MREs, meal ready to eat, because technically they all are. The difference is really convenience. You don't need to do anything to eat this except tear that package open.
Excellent. Well, I would encourage people, if you want to get some of this stuff, check out either of these. So we're going to MRE Depot for the MREs.
Yes.
You get 15% off. Coupon code Canadian Prepper.
Correct.
Also, Freeze Dried Wholesale, which is an excellent website. Go and buy some of this Reese peanut butter cup cookie dough. I want to see the price of peanut butter spike after this interview.
Right.
So I hope you've stockpiled a lot.
Same promo code, by the way, for 15% off Canadian Prepper, and that's
I can see this
code.
crumbling right now. I'm imagining.
Well, we might have to open that one and consume
No, we're
it if you
opening
just
this one right after this video, man. And we're probably gonna mix it. We're gonna maybe try to. I'm thinking of like a cookie dough
freeze-dried
mixed with ice cream or something like that.
Yeah, now you're talking. Yep.
I'm supposed to be, I guess, kiss that diet goodbye.
Get rid of those abs. They're no good.
Thanks for coming out, Steve.
Good seeing you, Nate.
Yeah,
Thanks for the invite. Appreciate it.
All right, guys. Check out those links in the description below. Thanks for watching. This guy just watched me eat a massive breakfast. All right. So, never before been done trying the freeze-dried cookie dough Reese peanut butter cups, uncooked. Uncooked, that just means just the
it's raw cookie dough. Yep.
All right.
You still could rehydrate those and bake them if you wanted an actual cookie, but why bother?
Oh, man.
That's going to make
That's massive. This is supposed to be one cookie?
That's one of about probably 10 in there.
Why do you have to make them so big?
I know. It's only the peanut butter. The chocolate chips are a little smaller. You'll get like
210 calories. That's actually... I think that's more than that.
Let me see. That's per serving, actually. 210 calories. Yeah, one cookie. What do you think? Silenced Canadian Prepper. Wow.
That is delicious, man. Like the way it crumbles. This isn't survival. This is...
Yeah, that's a little...
I don't know what this is. This is just pigging out.
Can we entice you?
By the end of the day...
No, don't try to break it. Go ahead and eat the whole one.
I'm going to have to go to the gym tonight. Pretty good, eh?
Yeah. All right, let's cut it because I don't want people to see me pigging out anymore.
The best way to support this channel is to support yourself by gearing up at CanadianPreparedness.com, where you'll find high-quality survival gear at the best prices, no junk, and no gimmicks. Use discount code PREPPINGGEAR for 10% off. Don't forget, the strong survive, but the prepared thrive. Stay safe.